Today, we are on our annual company trip at an inn in the neighboring state. During the banquet, our slightly tipsy manager, Chris, was laughing loudly. However, in the corner, a new female employee, Emily, who only has a high school diploma, was sitting alone. She didn't seem to be in good spirits. "Is everything okay? You don't seem very cheerful," I asked, unable to hold back my concern despite feeling it might be meddlesome. Emily, with tears in her eyes, said, "Chris told me that if I don't have a college degree, I'm not a real employee and should go home." Chris was saying such things again. Chris was a master at looking down on people and constantly saying terrible things. I had reached my limit. I couldn't let Chris do whatever he wanted any longer. I contacted someone, and Chris was about to learn Emily's true identity. "My name is Alex, and I'm 20 years old. I just graduated from a technical school this fall and am in my first year as a working adult. I've always liked tinkering with computers and wanted to study them more, so I decided to enroll in a technical school. My parents often told me that it would be better to go to college. But I decided to attend a technical school where I could learn more about computers in detail. Even after I enrolled, my parents kept saying, the job market in the States values degrees. So it will be tough with just a technical school diploma. It's not too late to transfer to a college. No, I've decided to work hard at the technical school." I told my parents this many times, but they continued to repeat the same thing. Both of my parents work. They both graduated from prestigious colleges and held high positions at their companies. As a result, I was often left home alone from a young age. I guess my parents cared so much about my education because they themselves graduated from top colleges. But back then, I just casually ignored their words. Looking back, I might have benefited from listening to them a bit more. After graduating from technical school, I joined a trading company and was assigned to the IT management department. It was the job I had always wanted, so I was excited to start working there. However, reality was not that sweet. On my first day, I nervously approached the door of the IT management office. Then, a woman in a brand new suit called out to me from behind. "Are you the new employee?" "Yes. My name is Alex, and I'm assigned to the IT management department starting today," I replied energetically. Then, the woman looked somewhat relieved. "I'm also a new employee. My name is Emily. It's reassuring to have another new employee. Looking forward to working with you," she said. Her friendliness made me smile as well. It felt reassuring not to be alone. "Let's do our best together." "Yes." Emily and I entered the office. Suddenly, all eyes in the office turned towards us. The atmosphere in the office was tense and a bit intimidating. As I was overwhelmed by the atmosphere, a large man started walking towards us. Tisk. Both Emily and I were startled. As soon as Chris saw our faces, he clicked his tongue in disapproval. While we stood there in shock, Chris began to say something surprising. "Why does the IT department always get low-educated people like you? What is HR thinking? Low-educated." I couldn't believe my ears. I had never been insulted like this by someone I just met. Emily was equally shocked. "I'm Chris, the manager of the IT department. Since you are assigned here, do your best for the department. I won't tolerate any mistakes." Chris didn't give us time to introduce ourselves before he sat down and told us to get to work. "Understood. I will do my best," I said and went to the desk I was shown, but Chris's insults kept coming. "You low-educated fools need to work harder than anyone else here. Another disappointing batch of new hires this year, what a shame." I could only sit at my desk, staring down. Then, a senior employee, Mike, sitting next to me, spoke up. "Chris always treats those without a college degree like that. I'm one of those people too. Don't let it get to you. Let's work hard." Mike whispered kindly to me, looking around to ensure no one else heard. "Thank you. I feel like I've lost all my confidence. I'm also a technical school graduate, and I'm in my second year here. If I can manage, so can you, Alex." As Mike and I were talking, Chris approached us from behind. "Are you low-educated guys bonding? Here, this is your job, data entry. Don't mess it up." Chris handed me a large stack of documents. Mike looked down, avoiding Chris's gaze. Yes, understood. I received the materials and, as instructed by Chris, started typing them in. Once Chris left the office, Mike looked at me. I'm really fed up with Chris. He's always belittling me for not having a college degree. I want to work hard and someday prove him wrong, Mike said with determination. Mike's eyes were filled with resolve. At the end of the workday, I was ready to leave. My first day was nothing like I imagined and had left me exhausted. I wanted to head home early and rest, so I hurried out of the company. But then I saw Emily. She was holding a large stack of documents, heading somewhere. Emily? Aren't you going home? I'm supposed to shred these documents as Chris told me to, she said, moving frantically. Emily was about to head to the copy room alone. I couldn't just leave her alone, so I accompanied her to the copy room. Sorry for dragging you along. This is something I should be doing by myself. It's impossible to shred such a large amount of documents alone. You're an important colleague, and I wanted to help. Emily looked like she was about to cry. Then she said something surprising. Maybe I shouldn't be working here. I love working with computers and wanted this job, but as a high school graduate, I can't be useful to anyone. Chris also said high school graduates are useless. Chris said that? I was confused by Emily's words. It was shocking enough that Chris called us useless, but it was even more absurd to label us that way on our first day. Seeing Emily so sad, I couldn't help but speak up. Emily, if you don't mind, would you like to have dinner together? Emily's eyes widened in surprise. I had never gone out to eat with a girl before. Though I was exhausted and wanted to go home, I couldn't leave Emily feeling down, and I wanted to talk a bit as fellow new employees. You want to eat with someone like me? She asked, sounding unsure after a day of harsh words from Chris. Of course. I'd like to chat as fellow newbies. Hearing this, Emily nodded happily. After finishing the tasks Chris had given us, we headed to a nearby stylish restaurant. Once seated at the counter, Emily looked excitedly at the menu. I've never been to a place like this before. It's exciting. Maybe it's because I get excited over things like this that Chris calls me useless. Emily stuck out her tongue and made a playful face. I shook my head. I don't understand why having just a high school diploma or graduating from a technical school is seen as a problem. I don't get why anyone would call us useless. Emily nodded in agreement. Since neither of us can drink alcohol, we toasted with juice. Emily quietly enjoyed the food at first, but then she started sharing her past. Actually, I was often sick and couldn't attend high school regularly. Because of that, I had to give up on going to college, she said, looking down. She seemed to regret her past. Looking at her, I said, I didn't go to college, but I have no regrets. I believe you have many qualities that Chris doesn't see. You should have more confidence in yourself. I said this while taking a bite of the grilled chicken in front of me. You're right. I won't let Chris get to me. Let's work hard together. Emily seemed to regain some confidence and smiled. From there, we shared stories about our past, talked about celebrities, and had a lively conversation. But then, the person we least wanted to see walked in through the restaurant entrance. Well, look at that. The useless duo having fun together. It was Chris. He had brought some of his highly educated subordinates to the restaurant. Emily couldn't even look at him and stared at the floor. Good evening. I greeted Chris, still surprised. But Chris ignored me and laughed. I don't want to talk to low-educated folks even outside of work. And walked to the back. The other customers there looked at Chris with disbelief. He started the conversation, so what is he talking about? I had reached my limit. But it seemed I wasn't the only one. Emily, shaking with anger, stood up. I tried to stop her, but it was too late. She spoke loudly. Chris, don't you think your words are too harsh? I might be a useless high school graduate, but I'm a human being. And it hurts to hear such things. The restaurant fell silent, and everyone was staring at Emily. She continued, out of breath, desperately pleading with Chris. The other customers who've been watching this started clapping for Emily. Feeling uncomfortable, Chris clicked his tongue and said, "A high school grad acting all high and mighty. Remember this," and stormed out of the restaurant. Emily looked somewhat proud. "Emily, that was amazing. But are you okay saying that?" I asked. With a wry smile, Emily said, "I'm scared about tomorrow, but I didn't say anything wrong. I'll be fine," and started looking at her phone. Suddenly, she stood up hurriedly and started putting on her coat. "Sorry, Alex. My dad, who worries a lot, has come to pick me up, so I have to go." It was getting late. I stood up too. After paying the bill, we left the restaurant, and there was Emily's father waiting in his car. He smiled at me as soon as he saw me. "Hey Dad. This is Alex, my coworker. Thanks to him, I was able to get through today." Emily introduced me to her father. Emily's father smiled kindly at me. "Thank you for looking after my daughter. It's her first day at work, so I got worried and came to pick her up. You might find it silly, but no matter how old she gets, I can't help but worry about her. The love a parent has for their child is a beautiful thing." I genuinely thought so. "No, I think it's wonderful. If I had a daughter, I think I'd do the same." Emily's father laughed at my words. "If you like, I can give you a ride home too." Emily's father said that and gave me a ride as well. What a kind person he is. I took advantage of Emily's father's offer. In the car, we had a pleasant conversation, and I enjoyed the time spent with Emily and her father. Even after arriving home, I remained in the afterglow of that enjoyable time. Though I was exhausted from dealing with Chris all day, the kindness of Emily's family lifted my spirits. I was glad I went out to eat with Emily. I thought so as I got into bed. However, I had no idea of the terrible events that were about to unfold. The next day, I headed to work with heavy footsteps. What would Chris say today? No matter what he said, I resolved to focus on my work. I was thinking about such things. When I entered the office, both Emily and Mike were already there. "Thanks for yesterday. My dad said he had a great time. Thank you for the ride home. Let's go out to eat again sometime." Emily nodded at my words. Then Mike approached me. "I'd like to go out for drinks with you too, Alex." Mike is making a playful face. "Of course. That sounds fun." We were enjoying a brief moment of light-hearted conversation. But then, a voice brought us back to reality. "Having fun, are you? Must be nice to slack off first thing in the morning." We quickly returned to our desks. It was still before work hours, so there shouldn't have been any problem with chatting. Chris seemed determined to belittle us. As I was feeling increasingly irritated, Chris called out to Emily loudly. "Hey, Emily. The light bulb is about to go out. Replace it." Emily, looking surprised, asked, "Should I contact the admin department?" In our company, the admin department handles maintenance issues. So Emily asked Chris this. However, Chris looked at Emily and snorted, "Huh? You're the one who's going to change it. Even someone as incompetent as you should be able to change a light bulb, right?" Everyone in the office started looking at Emily with pity. Emily quietly said, "Understood," and climbed a stepladder to change the bulb. The ceiling in the office was high, and even on the stepladder, she had to stretch to reach the bulb. It was unbelievable to ask a woman to do such a task. I couldn't take my eyes off Emily, worried as she precariously reached for the bulb. Then, suddenly, Emily slipped and almost fell off the stepladder. Mike, who was watching with concern, caught her just in time, preventing her from falling. But Chris was standing nearby, laughing loudly. "Ha ha. Can't even manage a ladder, can you? This is hilarious." Everyone in the office shot him cold looks, but he didn't seem to notice and kept laughing. Watching Chris laugh, I felt a deep irritation. If Emily had fallen off the ladder, it could have been a disaster. I couldn't understand how he could find this funny. He was probably holding a grudge from the restaurant incident and wanted to harass Emily. I was too stunned to say anything. Emily also looked visibly upset. Chris's behavior got worse after that. "Alex. Emily. I want some bread. Go get it. Emily and I couldn't believe what we were hearing. He could buy it himself. But we couldn't protest, so we went to buy it during work hours. It didn't stop there. Chris assigned us all sorts of tasks unrelated to IT management, like errands and cleaning. Both Emily and I were fed up with Chris, but quitting would mean letting him win. With a bit of stubbornness, we worked hard to complete the tasks he assigned. One day, as we arrived at work, the office was unusually bustling. Curious, I started working when Mike approached me. Next week is the company trip. Everyone is going, so you're coming too, right? I was surprised. Chris hadn't mentioned anything about a trip to me. Emily also seemed surprised, having overheard our conversation. A company trip. Am I allowed to join? It's a company trip, so it's obvious, right? Even if Chris says something, a company trip is part of the employee benefits. So of course we can participate. Mike said with a laugh. He told me that this year's trip was to a famous inn in the neighboring state. We'll get to enjoy some delicious food too. Mike added excitedly. But I felt conflicted. I knew Chris would likely insult us during the trip too. Thinking about it made me feel uneasy. I'm sure Chris doesn't want someone with my low level of education to participate either. Seeing my expression, Mike whispered, "Are you planning not to go?" I agreed hesitantly, and Mike looked a bit angry. "If you don't go, you'll be playing right into Chris's hands." Is that what you want? But, seeing my sad expression, Emily joined the conversation. Alex, let's go. We can't let Chris win. It won't be scary if we're together, Emily said, encouraging me. She was right. I hadn't done anything wrong. Chris was the one in the wrong for looking down on us for our education. I decided to stand up to Chris. On the day of the company trip, I was packing my bags at home. Noticing my gloomy expression, my parents approached me. "You don't look excited for the trip. Did something happen?" Since joining the company, I hadn't told my parents about the troubles I was facing. I didn't want to hear them say, "I told you education is important." But seeing their worried faces, I couldn't keep it to myself and told them everything about Chris. To my surprise, my parents listened to my story with genuine concern. I can't believe someone like that is a manager. That's right. But people like him will get their comeuppance. You should just enjoy the company trip. I was overwhelmed with gratitude. My parents, who had always been fixated on academic achievements, were now supporting me wholeheartedly. You can always talk to us. If anything happens, don't hesitate to ask for help. My father said that to me. I realized I wasn't alone. Feeling thankful, I left the house. The company trip started with everyone gathering at the office before taking the train. Emily and Mike were already there. But Chris was nowhere to be seen. I hoped he wouldn't come, but that hope was quickly dashed. "Sorry, I'm late." "Huh? Even the low-educated ones are coming? Good grief. Here we go again." I tried to tune out Chris's words as we headed to the station. On the train, Chris's taunts escalated. "How did you even think you could get a job here with such low qualifications? The nerve of you useless people." Other passengers on the train stared at Chris in disbelief. I suppressed my trembling anger and ignored him completely. If I listened seriously, I would end up getting sick. Emily, sitting next to me, seemed to be doing the same, fiddling with her phone to avoid looking at Chris. Eventually, we arrived at the inn. The inn staff lined up at the entrance to welcome us. I'm sharing a room with Mike. Feeling relieved inside, I put my luggage in the room. For a while, I chatted with Mike and enjoyed myself. When it was time for the banquet, Mike and I headed to the large hall. The hall was filled with lavish food. Everyone was already seated, but the atmosphere was tense. Chris's loud laughter was the only sound. He seemed a bit tipsy from the alcohol he had already consumed. Then I saw Emily sitting alone in the corner. Her eyes red and looking downcast. Concerned, I approached her. "You don't seem well. Is something wrong?" I asked. Hearing my words, Emily began to cry. "Chris told me that anyone without a college degree isn't a real employee and should leave. I don't think I can take it anymore." I was shocked by her words. No wonder the atmosphere was so tense. Chris had gone too far. I couldn't let him get away with this. I made a decision and called someone on the phone. After some time had passed, I calmed Emily down and finished eating the delicious food. Then I stood up and walked over to the laughing Chris. Chris apologized to Emily for saying she isn't a real employee because she doesn't have a college degree. I demanded angrily. Mike's eyes widened in surprise. Chris looked shocked, then started laughing again. Why should I apologize? I was just stating a fact. Do you think you're some kind of hero? Don't you realize that some people can't go to college because of their circumstances? Chris clicked his tongue. Excuses, excuses. It's probably just because their parents are also low educated and didn't care if they went to college. I'd love to see what their parents look like. Insulting someone's parents was beyond belief. Who did Chris think he was? Just as I was about to shout in anger, the sliding doors of the banquet hall burst open. You want to see their parents, do you? I am Emily's father. Emily's father had been listening to everything and was furious. Dad! Emily exclaimed in surprise. Emily's father? Did you come to take her home because you're worried? Just take her and go. She doesn't deserve to be here on this trip. Our co-workers, noticing who Emily's father was, began to look uneasy. And they are desperately trying to convey something to Chris. Chris, this man is. But Chris was already drunk and didn't notice. Fine. I'll leave with my daughter, but you don't need to come to the company anymore. What? Chris finally looked at Emily's father and realized who he was. The room fell silent. You're Mr. Williams. Why are you here? Now you realize. I came because I was worried about my daughter. Mr. Williams. I'm so sorry. I was drunk and said terrible things. So, he knew he was saying horrible things. His face turned pale as the realization set in. Yes, Emily's father was the company president. The day Emily and I had dinner together, Mr. Williams had introduced himself to me. It was then that I realized he was Emily's father. Mr. Williams, worried about his only daughter, had given me his contact information in case anything happened. I never thought I'd have to call him, but seeing Emily in tears made me realize it was time. When I called, Mr. Williams said he'd be right here and hung up. What are you saying now? Telling an employee to leave a company trip because they don't have a degree is wrong. Who do you think you are? Hearing Mr. Williams's words, Chris is completely looking down. Do you treat employees without degrees like this all the time? Mr. Williams shouted. Then Chris hastily started making excuses. It was clear that he wanted to resolve the situation peacefully at all costs. No. This is just because I was drunk. I don't usually act like this. Chris was lying through his teeth. I could only sigh at his dishonesty. Then, Mike spoke up loudly. Chris always treats non-degree employees like this, even at work. Mr. Williams's face grew even redder with anger. Chris, if you like degrees so much, let me tell you something. What? Mr. Williams glared at Chris, his voice rising. I started this company with just a high school diploma. I wanted to go to college, but my family was poor. I had to give up that dream. Chris wiped the cold sweat from his forehead with a towel. He seems to be at a loss for words. A high school graduate founded this company. If you don't like it, then you don't need to come back to the office. Chris, his voice shaking, desperately pleaded. No, that's not it at all. I want to work under you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams refused to listen to Chris any further. He took the downcast Emily by the hand and began to leave the banquet hall. But before exiting, he turned back and looked at Chris once more. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Alex's father is an executive at one of our key partners. He's not someone you can look down on. Know your place. Chris's face turned pale as he repeatedly glanced at me in shock. No way. Chris sank to the ground. Mr. Williams gave me a reassuring smile. Alex, I'm sorry you've had to endure this. It's my fault for not keeping a closer eye on things. I never thought someone in my company would judge people based on their education. Rest assured, such individuals will not remain here," he said as he left with Emily. "Yes, my father is an executive at a major partner of the company where I work. He had informed me of this when I decided to join the company. I had only shared this information with Mr. Williams and Emily. It's because I thought there was no need to talk. That's why I was so infuriated when Chris insulted my parents. I knew how hard my father had worked to achieve his position. No one who knew nothing about my parents had the right to look down on them." After Mr. Williams and Emily left, the banquet hall fell into a heavy silence, and the event ended quietly. The next day, Mike and I left the inn quietly. Following through on his promise, Mr. Williams fired Chris for his inappropriate behavior. Chris protested until the end, but to no avail. Before leaving, Chris made a spiteful remark. "A low-educated fool like you will crumble, no matter how educated your parents are." His words echoed hollowly through the office. Then, for the first time, my colleagues, who had been silently observing, spoke out loudly in unison. "Just leave. You're the one who doesn't belong here. If anyone's going to crumble, it's you, Chris. You're the one who's disgraceful." Chris turned bright red as he stormed out of the office. Everyone clapped as he left. "Finally, peace is returning," Emily said, and Mike nodded in agreement. "This incident taught us that karma does catch up with those who do wrong." A year later, I am thriving in the IT management department. "Alex, about this weekend, do you want to check out this new restaurant?" "Sure, let's go." Emily and I had started dating with our parents' approval. I never imagined our relationship would develop this way, but thanks to Emily, my days are filled with joy. Someday, I hope to build a wonderful family with Emily.